A modest gathering of loved ones in Indiana began with laughter. It ended in a double homicide. 25-year-old Noelle Renee Trice and her partner, 29-year-old Brian Keith Lash, hosted a backyard barbecue. It was the night of June 9, 2017. They gathered to watch a professional basketball championship game. Once the final whistle blew, the guests departed. The couple retreated to their bedroom, unaware they would never see another sunrise. Silence fell over the house. Fort Wayne, Indiana, stands as the second-largest urban center in the state. The city is defined by its humid summers and bone-chilling winters. It is recognized as a regional hub for academia. Institutions of higher learning define the landscape. This city was the lifelong home of Noelle Trice and Brian Lash. Noelle entered the world on June 28, 1991. She was the daughter of Kimberly Gomez and Norman Trice III. Raised alongside 5 siblings, she remained rooted in Fort Wayne. Here, she eventually crossed paths with a fellow local named Brian. Brian Lash was born on July 7, 1987. His parents were April and Brian Lash Sr. He and his sister, Amber, grew up under the care of both parents. This stability lasted until a sudden family loss. His father passed away before Brian met Noelle. By then, Brian was already a father to 2 daughters. Their names were Olivia and Alexis. When Brian and Noelle finally united, their bond deepened quickly into a shared household. The couple soon welcomed their own child into the world. They named their young son King Richard. Friends remember a couple who thrived on social connection. Their lives revolved around the joy of community and kinship. Their front door was rarely locked to those they loved. Evenings were typically filled with shared meals and the sound of laughter. The sudden absence of communication was a chilling departure from their normal routine. The phone lines went cold. Unanswered calls fueled a growing sense of dread among their inner circle. At 9:51 a.m. on June 10, 2017, a concerned friend arrived at the residence to check on their well-being. He was unprepared for the carnage waiting behind the door. Noelle and Brian lay dead inside their home on Weiser Park Avenue. Both had been brutally stabbed. Forensic evidence suggested a violent struggle that moved through multiple rooms. Their infant son had been staying with relatives that night. This fortunate timing spared the child from the slaughter. Paramedics pronounced both parents dead upon arrival. Autopsy results confirmed the cause of death as multiple sharp force injuries. The sheer number of wounds indicated a frenzied attack. Brian succumbed to massive internal hemorrhaging. Medical examiners determined that Noelle's death had been instantaneous. The families held private funerals on June 16, 2017. They were buried side by side. Detectives initially focused on the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. The search for a motive began in the shadows. Initial interviews with the family confirmed the timeline of the previous evening. Everyone had been together just hours before the bloodbath. The investigation soon pivoted toward the guests at the gathering. Some were there for more than just a barbecue. Legal filings state that Noelle allegedly distributed high-quality narcotics from the home. One specific name surfaced repeatedly during interrogations. That name was Dustin Neal. When brought into the station, Neal admitted to being present at the house that night. He claimed a long-standing history with the victims. He told police he had known Noelle for more than 2 decades. Neal acknowledged knowing about the lucrative nature of Noelle's alleged business. He understood the street value involved thousands of dollars. He maintained that he departed the residence around midnight. Without physical evidence, the police had only suspicions to work with. Neal was released from custody due to a lack of probable cause. Investigators turned their attention back to Noelle's alleged secondary income. While the narcotics trade remained a lead, detectives explored other potential conflicts. The search for the killer widened. The trail eventually vanished. Months turned into a year, and the file was moved to the cold case unit. In July 2018, the silence was finally broken. An individual came forward with a crucial piece of information. This witness provided a statement regarding Dustin Neal's activities. Allegedly, Neal placed a phone call at 8 a.m. the morning of the murders. He was reportedly attempting to liquidate a significant amount of narcotics. The witness found the timing and the urgency deeply unsettling. Neal was described as sounding extremely agitated and frantic. It was further alleged that he was a frequent user of cocaine. His lifestyle often left him desperate for untraceable cash. Despite this character profile, detectives lacked the forensics to make an arrest. 4 more years of silence followed. Then, a second witness emerged with a testimony that changed everything. This new information was devastating. The witness claimed that Neal's own half-brother had confessed the truth in confidence. The confession directly implicated Dustin Neal in the double homicide. By October 2022, authorities located the sibling. Detectives brought the half-brother in for a formal interrogation. His identity remains protected by the state. Authorities received a report concerning Neal's cousin, who claimed the suspect had been openly boasting about the killings. The relative alleged Neal admitted to breaching the residence, purportedly under the impression that the occupants were away at that hour. While searching the premises for narcotics, he reportedly detected movement and caught sight of Brian approaching. His response was immediate and violent, allegedly stabbing Brian repeatedly before resuming his hunt for the contraband. It was then he crossed paths with Noelle, who had been startled awake by the noise, and he proceeded to stab her until she was lifeless. He would later vaunt that the force used against her face was enough to wedge the blade. Investigators held these statements as circumstantial weight, yet they still lacked the forensic link necessary to place Neal inside the Tri-Slash home when the lives were taken. A secondary, more meticulous review of the gathered evidence was initiated, during which a fresh witness emerged, providing testimony that further incriminated the suspect. This individual recalled a conversation regarding the homicides where Neal abruptly interjected, "We're not going to talk about that." Reportedly, he then chillingly claimed, "I have 5 bodies under me." The witness further asserted that they had visited a trailer where both Neal and an associate admitted to incinerating clothing in the aftermath of the double homicide. Compelled by these leads, the Fort Wayne Police Department, in coordination with a federal operative, initiated a deep forensic audit of Neal's mobile phone activity from the night of the crime. Following an exhaustive digital search, the investigative team successfully isolated the data from the date of the slayings. In the early hours of June 10, 2017, at approximately 3 a.m., Neal's device connected to a tower near a peer's home. Later that morning, the signal shifted, registering on cellular towers in the immediate vicinity of the victim's home. This telemetry situated him at the scene between 6:20 and 7:04 a.m. Detectives were certain he was withholding the truth. During every interrogation, Neal maintained a firm stance of innocence, insisting that he had not stepped foot back on the afforded property once the party concluded. However, the silent testimony of the digital records told a far more predatory story. The physical evidence eventually caught up. A fragmented fingerprint had been lifted from Noelle's personal phone. It was a forensic match for Neal. At 35 years old, he was taken into custody in January 2023 within Wells County. Multiple agencies collaborated to secure his arrest for the deaths of Noel Trice and Brian Lash. The formal charges included dual counts of murder, felony murder, and robbery, leading to catastrophic physical injury. He currently remains in custody, awaiting his transfer to Allen County. Detective Brian Martin noted that Neal was no stranger to law enforcement, having long been a person of interest. Regarding the breakthrough, Martin stated, "We're obviously very pleased with the fact that we were able to bring a conclusion to this case with the arrest of Dustin Neal." The detective emphasized that civilian testimony was the catalyst for synthesizing the forensic data, securing the warrant. If it was your family, your loved one who was taken away from you in a violent way, you would want someone with that information to come forward, he remarked. He further expressed profound relief in personally notifying the victims' relatives before the arrest became public. He maintained that providing answers to the questions of who and why aids the family's endurance, though he remains skeptical of finality. I'm not a fan of the word closure because I'm not sure that you can ever have closure when a loved one is taken from you in such a violent way, Martin observed. As Neil's legal proceedings continue, we pivot to Amsterdam, the cultural heart of the Netherlands. A global sanctuary for fine art, it houses the Rijksmuseum and the Van Gogh Museum, drawing millions to its historic center annually. While it lacks the sprawling monuments of its neighbors, the city's character is found in cramped corridors and centuries-old structures, a landscape of storied, almost surreal romanticism. For 10 years, however, these same streets harbored a grim secret that has only recently surfaced. On January 30th, 2013, a citizen walking the banks near the NDSM wharf spotted a blue plastic bundle adrift in the IJ River. Authorities were summoned immediately to pull the suspicious parcel from the current. Inside the layers of industrial plastic, they found the torso of a Caucasian male. The victim had been systematically dismembered. Detectives launched a massive operation to locate the missing remains. But despite an exhaustive search of the waterways, nothing more was recovered. Lead investigator Erkan Jaran stated that the inquiry began with witness canvassing and a thorough search. Missing person registries yielded nothing. The electronic search went dark. He remained a nameless John Doe. Investigators concluded the man originated from Northern or Eastern Europe. His roots were distant and cold. His end was undeniably violent. The only recourse was to extract DNA from the remains for future identification. Detectives hoped this genetic code would one day reveal his name. Eventually, the state surrendered to the silence. It was time to bury the remains. The service was held at St. Barbara Cemetery in Amsterdam West. Poet Jana Luntens spoke for the nameless man. 8 years passed before investigators saw a flicker of hope. A significant lead emerged in 2021. The cold case was officially reopened for scrutiny. Authorities engaged Interpol to scan global databases. They filtered for reports involving missing white males. A Russian family had reported a disappearance in 2013. They consented to provide genetic samples. These samples were cross-referenced with the torso. The laboratory work was a slow, deliberate process. Meanwhile, Dutch officials renewed public interest in January 2022. They offered 15,000 euros. The bounty was for information on the enigma. The genetic data from Russia finally arrived for testing. The samples were compared to the evidence held in the Netherlands. The result was a definitive match. The torso finally had a name, yet it would be another 12 months before the truth went public. The announcement was delayed despite previous cooperation. The relationship between the two nations was about to shatter. All diplomatic and forensic communications stalled. The invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 changed everything. Because of the conflict, all interaction between Dutch and Russian police was terminated. The bridge was burned. This forced the Dutch to make a difficult choice. They released his name before they could contact his kin. In January 2023, the victim was named. He was Alexander Levin, age 65. He was an affluent businessman at the time of his death. Levin moved in the high-stakes antique trade. Based in St. Petersburg, he was a skilled icon painter. He specialized in works laden with religious history. Sacred symbolism defined his art. Levin was a frequent visitor to Amsterdam and its historic streets. He utilized a local warehouse for his commercial interests, but his profile was already known to the police. In 1998, customs agents stopped him at Schiphol Airport. It was not a routine inspection. He was carrying a stolen 18th century marine atlas. The rare volume was by the cartographer Johan van Keulen. Agents also discovered 24 historic drawings. These were the work of the French master Jacques Collot. A 1999 court ruling sentenced him to 10 months. He was a convicted art smuggler. Press reports later detailed his history. He had been intercepted 5 times for trafficking stolen treasures. Detectives reconstructed his final days before the murder. They tracked his movements across international borders. Flight data confirmed his arrival. Levin landed at Schiphol from St. Petersburg on January 17, 2013. He was booked for the Canary Islands the following day. It was a journey he would never take. The flight manifest remained blank for his seat. Investigators believe he was killed before the plane departed. His death likely occurred in those final hours. Russian officials had initially uncovered suspicious financial patterns. Assets were being funneled into a mysterious account. This happened shortly after another dealer's demise. This trail of money vanished when the war began. The invasion of Ukraine buried the evidence. 2 suspects were eventually detained for questioning. They were released when proof remained elusive. Unconfirmed reports suggest a more sinister motive. Levin may have been caught in a lethal trap. Extortion by syndicates or state security services is a theory. This may have led to his execution. Officials believe identifying him publicly is a tactical move. It may accelerate the search for the truth. They hope to alert Levin's family through the media. A direct line of communication is now vital. The file remains open. Years would pass before police were called to another dark scene. A search began for 21-year-old Leslie Marie Perlov. The discovery of her body would haunt the detectives. She was found beneath an oak tree in the Stanford foothills. She vanished on February 13th. 3 days later, her body was found strangled. Leslie was the first casualty of a wider horror. This was the beginning of the Stanford murders. The university campus in California was no longer safe. Ranked 3rd among the nation's elite institutions, this West Coast university commands immense prestige, celebrated for its rigorous academic programs, and a legacy including 35 Nobel laureates. In the 1970s, however, a shadow fell over Stanford's reputation as 3 young women were found dead. These killings cast a long, grim pall over the university's storied grounds. It would take nearly 45 years for advancements in forensic biology to finally untangle a mystery that had long confounded those seeking justice. Leslie was a woman of singular focus and drive. She held a definitive ambition: to serve as the first female president of the United States. Her sister, Diane, saw her as a pillar of strength and a guiding light. Academically, Leslie was peerless. She accelerated through high school in 3 years, following a path set by her mother and uncle. She entered Stanford University and, once again, completed her degree in a mere 3 years. Diane recalls that Leslie was raised to never apologize for the depth of her intellect. Driven by a sense of justice, she earned her history degree and secured a seat at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. She resided in Los Altos Hills with Florence, her widowed mother, and her younger siblings, Diane and widowed, Craig. To support her studies, Leslie worked as a clerk at the Stanford Law Library. Her failure to return home one evening did not immediately spark alarm. Her family was accustomed to her adventurous spirit and her habit of photographing the local landscape. Diane knew of a specific plan. Leslie intended to hire an artist to turn a photograph into a watercolor gift for their mother's birthday. As the hours stretched on, the absence of such a responsible young woman became deeply concerning. Her family alerted the authorities. Her orange 1972 Chevrolet Nova was discovered abandoned by a rock quarry. The vehicle was locked, but her shoes remained inside. For 3 days, a systematic search of the terrain continued until the grim discovery on February 16, 1973. Leslie had been strangled with her own scarf. Her remains were left beneath a tree in a secluded woodland. Her clothing had been disturbed, and her pantyhose were used as a gag. Bloodstains marked a nearby raincoat. Her purse and keys were missing and have never been found. Investigators concluded that Leslie was the victim of a fatal predatory attack, evidenced by the degrading manner in which her body was staged. A post-mortem examination fixed the time of death to the night of her disappearance. The violence was extreme. Evidence suggested Leslie fought desperately for her life. She suffered blunt force injuries to her head and torso. Crucially, examiners recovered biological material from beneath her fingernails. Some reports indicate that Leslie managed to bite her assailant. At the time, the coroner's office was non-committal regarding sexual assault, though later analysis confirmed it. Technology in the 1970s was limited. These DNA samples were archived, waiting for a future that could read them. Detectives were forced to rely on traditional methodology. They conducted exhaustive interviews across the local area, searching for any trace of Leslie's final movements. A witness eventually came forward. This individual claimed to see Leslie in her car, parked beside a gray vehicle. A young man with blonde hair was reportedly leaning toward her window in conversation. The lead ultimately went cold. The murder left her family shattered. According to Diane, their mother was consumed by a grief so profound it bordered on apathy toward the investigation. The reality of her daughter's death was a finality she could not move past. In an alleged act of mourning, she removed and discarded every family photograph. Diane noted the absence of a formal funeral or public memorial. There was only a quiet, private goodbye. In the months following, investigators pursued every available avenue. But as leads dried up, the task force dissolved until the case was relegated to 2 part-time detectives. A quiet dread took hold, the fear that Leslie's life would be forgotten. Just as the initial shock began to fade from the campus consciousness, another act of violence shattered the peace. 13 months later, on March 24, 1974, 21-year-old Janet Ann Taylor had been visiting friends Deborah Adams and Susan Ernst at Stanford. While departing, her companions pleaded with her to stay. They warned that hitchhiking was no longer safe. Janet refused, citing the need to care for her dogs. She chose a spot to flag a ride. This location was less than 1 mile from where Leslie Perlam was found dead a year prior. She was no Stanford graduate. Janet attended Canada College and had recently secured a new position at a maritime information bureau. Despite this, she knew the university grounds intimately. Her father was Chuck Taylor. He served as the university athletic director and head coach. On the morning of March 25, 1974, a milkman discovered a woman's body in a ravine along Sand Hill Road. It was located 3 miles from the university campus. The victim was identified as Janet Taylor. She had been strangled to death. Initial forensic reports indicated she was not sexually assaulted. She remained mostly clothed, missing only her raincoat, shoes, and belt. The belt was later recovered nearby. Her purse was never found. As with the previous case, leads were scarce. Detectives assumed she was abducted while hitchhiking. It appeared the killer discarded evidence along the road to avoid detection. Within 7 days, investigators theorized that Janet and Leslie were victims of the same man. This theory gained traction as the public feared a serial predator near the university. The geographic proximity and identical methods were too significant for authorities to ignore. The trail eventually went cold. In October 1974, the campus faced another horror. On the night of October 12, 1974, 19-year-old Arliss Perry argued with her husband. Seeking a reprieve from the conflict, she sought sanctuary in a quiet place. She went to the Stanford Memorial Church. Arliss was not a student, though Bruce was. Bruce was enrolled in the pre-medical program. The couple lived in an apartment near campus. Bruce was accustomed to her late visits to the chapel and felt no immediate concern. The church closed at midnight. She had left their home shortly before 11 p.m. As hours passed, Bruce grew worried. He began searching the university grounds for his wife. He found the church locked and Arliss nowhere in sight. He contacted campus security. Security was alerted to watch for the woman. Desperate, Bruce called the local police. He reported her missing. He explained the argument to the officers who interviewed him. After his statement, police cleared Bruce of involvement. The search for Arliss continued. At dawn on October 13, 1974, a guard discovered a body inside the church. This was the third campus murder in 2 years. Police were desperate for answers. This crime was different. Arliss Perry had been subjected to a horrific sexual assault. She was found partially nude. The attacker used religious items found within the sanctuary. Candlesticks were involved. Biological evidence was later recovered from a nearby kneeling cushion. Decades would pass before genetic testing was advanced enough to identify a suspect. Like the others, the case of Arliss Perry eventually went cold. Theories surfaced involving occult rituals or the work of a famous serial killer. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, eventually claimed responsibility for the killing. It was a lie. Berkowitz was seeking attention. He was not near California then. Ted Bundy was also considered a suspect for the deaths of Leslie and Janet. The victims shared his preferred profile: young, white women with long, dark hair. Bundy was familiar with the area. However, the evidence did not support this theory. The cases remained unsolved. Eventually, forensic science provided a massive breakthrough. Cold case detectives began re-evaluating the physical evidence from the 1970s murders. The first break involved Arliss Perry. DNA from the scene pointed to a suspect. The genetic evidence finally identified a man who had long been under police suspicion. Stephen Crawford carried secrets the authorities never heard. He was the individual who discovered the remains of Arliss Perry. From the opening moments of the report, his behavior drew scrutiny. He remained a person of interest throughout the decades-long inquiry. Suspicion is not proof. At the time of the murder, no biological traces connected Crawford to the scene. Decades passed. In the early 2000s, surveillance teams recovered a discarded cigarette butt from the former security guard. Forensic experts extracted a genetic signature from the filter. They compared this profile to biological material recovered from the Perry homicide. The results were definitive. Biological traces on the garments worn by Arliss matched the genetic code of Stephen Crawford. During a voluntary interrogation in 2016, detectives confronted him. They demanded an explanation for his presence on the victim's attire. Crawford maintained a wall of denial. He claimed he had never met the young woman, nor had he ever touched her. As investigators pressed for the truth, he retreated into silence. It became clear he would provide no further admissions. By 2018, authorities finally obtained a warrant to search his residence. They arrived at his San Jose apartment to finalize the arrest. Crawford chose a different ending. Before officers could enter, he ended his own life with one gunshot to the head. Death closed the file on Arliss, confirming his guilt. Yet, the shadows surrounding 2 other victims remained stubbornly dark. The question haunted the task force. Was this man responsible for the other lives taken on the campus? Using Crawford's genetic map, technicians re-examined the evidence. They tested biological samples found on Leslie Perlov and Janet Taylor. The profiles did not align. Investigators turned to genetic genealogy, the same revolutionary technique that trapped the Golden State Killer. While Crawford took the life of Arliss Perry, another wolf stalked the grounds of Stanford in the 1970s. The trail led to a different former staff member. His name was John Arthur Getrew. Verification was the next hurdle. Detectives required a fresh sample to confirm the biological link to Getrew. Surveillance teams trailed the suspect and his spouse. They successfully intercepted a used coffee cup from a public waste bin. The match was absolute. His DNA was identical to traces found under Leslie's fingernails and on the clothing of Janet Taylor. On November 20th, police descended on his Hayward residence. Getrew was taken into custody and transported to the Santa Clara facility. The theory held true. For years, police believed a single predator was responsible for both Leslie and Janet, and they were right. The subsequent probe unmasked a monster hiding in plain sight. John Doe had long projected the image of a kind, fatherly figure. Acquaintances recalled a man with a gift for craftsmanship. He was a skilled woodworker who seemed entirely ordinary. That normalcy was a lie. He was a prolific serial killer, though his carefully constructed mask did not deceive everyone. His pattern of violence began in Germany in 1963. At 18 years old, Doe lived with his family on a military installation. The setting was Bad Kreuznach. On June 8th, he joined several companions for a social gathering at a church chapel. Margaret Williams was also in attendance that evening. She was only 15, the daughter of a United States Army chaplain. Witnesses stated that Margaret departed the dance alone. She crossed paths with Doe on the dark streets as she walked home. Sunrise revealed a horror in the field behind the chapel. She had been strangled to death and left in the tall grass. The autopsy confirmed a sexual assault. Doe was quickly identified as the primary suspect and placed under arrest. During the legal proceedings, he confessed to the act. However, he insisted the young girl had accompanied him of her own volition. He told the bench his intent was never lethal. He claimed he only intended to render her unconscious. A juvenile court sentenced him to 10 years in a German cell. He served 6 before being deported to the United States. He soon connected with a woman named Susan. She was raising a 5-year-old daughter, Kathy, and looking for a fresh start. They wed in 1970. Doe frequently looked after Kathy while her mother was away. The child felt a deep, unspoken revulsion toward him. Susan, however, failed to see the danger lurking in her own home. Behind closed doors, Doe subjected Kathy to horrific abuse. He used psychological terror to ensure her silence, threatening her mother's safety. The marriage ended when Susan walked in on Doe assaulting her child. She filed for divorce immediately. While living this double life, Doe had already claimed Leslie and Janet. By 1975, he struck again. The victim was a 17-year-old, known only as Ellen Doe. She was a member of the local Girl Scout explorers. Doe served as the group's scout leader. He occupied a position of trust during their outdoor excursions. He utilized intimidation to control the teenager. Eventually, the truth surfaced, leading to a charge of statutory rape. He entered a guilty plea and received a 6-month jail term. The system would prove remarkably lenient. He walked free after serving only 30 days. The remainder of his sentence was suspended in exchange for a monetary fine. It appeared Doe had abandoned his violent habits upon finding companionship. His transformation began when he met and married a woman named Linda. Their union lasted 25 years, producing 2 children within a seemingly normal home. Cancer took Linda in 2003. Until November 2018, the family maintained a standard American existence. For Doe's son, Aaron, the subsequent revelation was a profound trauma. He discovered his father's past was defined by malice, transitioning to his statement, "This was not the man who raised me. I never suspected he could do this," Aaron said. Aaron describes an upbringing rooted in warmth. He remembers a home where empathy and respect for others were prioritized. The family was raised on a foundation of genuine affection. They were taught to treat every person with dignity. His father strictly enforced the protection of women. Now, like the victims, Aaron finds his own reality has been decimated. Convinced his entire life was a calculated deception, he has now severed all communication with his 78-year-old father. Doe is now officially classified as a serial killer. The transition from private citizen to convicted murderer is complete. In September 2021, he admitted to Janet Taylor's murder. He was sentenced to life in a Stockton facility. The case regarding Leslie Perloff faced significant delays. Proceedings were postponed in 2021 due to Doe's failing health. On January 10, 2023, Getru finally confessed. He entered a guilty plea for the murder of Leslie Perlov. He admitted to the sexual assault and strangulation of both young women. The details confirmed a history of extreme violence. Authorities state his long evasion was due to the historical absence of DNA profiling. Forensic science eventually caught him. Sentencing is scheduled for April 26, 2023. A maximum term for the Perlov murder is the expected outcome. Transitioning to the victim's family, Diane informed reporters that the search for justice had spanned 50 grueling years. Quote, "It has been 50 years this month since my older sister was taken from us," Diane stated. Quote, "50 years this monster spent living in freedom. I would not allow her to remain voiceless or invisible." Her determination ensured that her sister was finally seen as a human being rather than a cold case. Your phone remembers everything. Noel Trice and Brian Lash hosted a backyard barbecue on a warm June night in 2017. They laughed with friends, watched the game, and said their goodbyes. By morning, they were both gone, stabbed to death inside their own home, while their infant son slept safely at a relative's house. For 6 years, the killer walked free. He talked freely. He even bragged about what he had done. "I have 5 bodies under me," he reportedly told someone who was listening. And that was his undoing. Because in the digital age, nothing truly disappears. Cell towers recorded his movements. A fingerprint survived on a victim's phone. Witnesses who had stayed silent for years finally found their courage. And one by one, every lie Dustin Neal had told collapsed under the weight of evidence he never thought would catch up with him. Detective Brian Martin said something that stays with you. "I'm not a fan of the word closure because I'm not sure you can ever have closure when a loved one is taken from you in such a violent way." He's right. Justice is not the same as healing, but it is a beginning. This story teaches us something vital. Speak up. The witness who came forward, the one who remembered that phone call, is the reason a killer is now behind bars. One person, one decision to tell the truth. It is never too late to do the right thing.